Why was the quiet janitor staring at the caskets like she already knew the names inside? The hangar lights flickered with a cold November glow, and the massive C-17 loomed like a steel guardian in the silence. Three coffins lay inside, draped in flags that seemed to carry both weight and lightness at once, the weight of sacrifice, the lightness of memory. Outside, dawn struggled against heavy clouds, and the air carried the bitter sting of jet fuel and frost. Maria Santos had been here before anyone else, broom in hand, coveralls smudged with oil and dust. On paper she was maintenance staff, a cleaner of cabins, a checker of bolts and fuel lines. To most she was invisible, a shadow in the corner of the hangar, sweeping, tightening, nodding respectfully, and then vanishing when the real work began. But today something was different. Her gloved hand lingered on the edge of the aircraft's fuselage longer than usual, fingertips brushing the words stenciled in bold black, "Spirit of America." For most, those were just words. For her, they were an invocation, a reminder, a call she had tried to silence for 7 long years. The sound of boots echoed behind her. Sergeant, the hangar chief, carried his clipboard like a weapon, eyes sharp from 15 years of service. "Morning, Santos," he muttered, flipping through his papers. "Everything ready?" She nodded quickly like she always did. "Yes, Sergeant, fuel check complete, systems green, cargo secure." Cargo, that was the word they always used. As if it softened the truth. As if it didn't matter that inside those coffins were not boxes but sons and daughters. David, 24, California. Michael, 29, Texas. Jennifer, 22, Ohio. Maria knew their names. She had memorized their stories, though no one had ever asked her to. It was her private ritual. Before every angel flight, she found the files, read the details, whispered the names. She didn't know why she did it. Maybe because if she said their names out loud, it made the silence less unbearable. And yet, as she stood in the shadow of the C-17 that morning, she felt her pulse rising faster than it should. Something about today pressed harder against her chest, as if the weight inside the hangar wasn't just the coffins, but the past she had buried with them. At 9:30, the alarm shattered the quiet. "Medical emergency, flight line. Medical emergency." The hangar seemed to freeze. Maria dropped her wrench, metal clattering across the floor. Outside, an ambulance wailed, its flashing lights reflecting against the steel of the aircraft. People ran, the techs, officers spilling from nearby hangars. Maria didn't run. She couldn't. Her legs refused. When she finally forced herself forward, she saw him. Major Collins, the pilot assigned to the Angel flight, pale and unconscious, his face covered with an oxygen mask as paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher. "Grabbed a medic. What happened?" "Heart attack," the paramedic snapped, already loading Collins into the ambulance. "Stress-induced, he's critical." The siren wailed again, fading into the distance. Maria stood motionless, her breath shallow. Collins had flown Angel flights for nearly a decade. Calm, steady, dependable. The kind of pilot you wanted for the most sacred of missions. And now, 4 hours before departure, he was gone. Inside Hangar 7, the crisis meeting unfolded like a storm. Colonel Henderson, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, presided at the center. Officers debated, voices rising, tension thick as smoke. "Captain Martinez can't fly alone," one officer said. "Protocol requires 2 pilots." "There are no replacements on base," another replied. "Closest is 6 hours out. The families have been waiting at Dover for 3 days already." "Then we delay," Henderson said firmly. "Safety protocols are non-negotiable." Maria stood in the corner, hands trembling, heart pounding. A storm raged in her chest, louder than the voices around her. She stared at the floor, willing herself to stay silent. She had no place here. She was ground crew, invisible. But then the words slipped out. "I can fly it." It wasn't a shout, it wasn't even strong. Just a whisper, a fragile thread of sound. And yet the entire room froze. Every eye turned toward her. Colonel Henderson squinted. "Excuse me." Maria swallowed hard, her throat burned. "I can fly the Angel flight. I'm a qualified pilot." A silence so deep you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the room, then laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Santos, you're ground crew. You sweep hangars. You're not a pilot." But Maria didn't flinch, her voice steadied. "I have a pilot's license, 1,800 hours logged, certified." Henderson frowned. "Santos, you've been cleaning hangars for 5 years. There are no records of you as a pilot." "That's correct." Her words came out measured, heavy. "Because I stopped being a pilot." The room buzzed with whispers. "Stopped being a pilot? Why, when?" Martinez leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Why would you stop?" Maria's chest tightened. 7 years of silence pressed against her lungs. She wanted to say nothing, to fold herself back into the shadows. But the weight of the coffins in the hangar, the waiting families, the memory of a face she had never forgotten. "Personal reasons," she managed. "Not good enough," Henderson barked. "This isn't a training exercise. This is sacred. Families are waiting. We cannot gamble on." But Martinez cut in softer. "Sir, maybe we should at least verify her credentials." The room went still again. Henderson's jaw clenched. "Run her name now." Before anyone moved, the hangar doors creaked open. Chaplin stepped inside, his presence calm yet commanding, as though even the storm of grief and protocol bent slightly around him. His gaze swept the room, then landed on Maria. "Santos," he said gently, "did you volunteer?" Her voice shook, but she nodded. "Yes, father." The chaplain walked closer, his eyes searching hers. Then he saw it, a flicker of ink beneath her sleeve as her cuff slipped, a small black wing. He froze. He whispered. "What is it?" Henderson asked. The chaplain's voice trembled with reverence. "Show them." Maria's heart slammed against her ribs. For years she had hidden it, burying the mark of who she had been. Her hand shook as she rolled back the sleeve. The room seemed to collapse into silence as the tattoo revealed itself, a single angel wing, delicate black lines etched into her skin, and around it words too fine to mistake. "Captain James Mitchell, Angel Flight 2017, never forgotten." Gasps, a stifled curse. Martinez's lips parted, stunned. Henderson's face drained of color. The chaplain's voice was low, steady, reverent. "The single-wing tattoo, only one kind of pilot bears that mark. Do you know what it means?" Shook his head. "No." "It means," the chaplain said, "that she once flew an angel flight alone, that she lost her co-pilot mid-mission and still completed the flight." All eyes locked on Maria. Her chest tightened. The words clawed their way up from a place she had sealed for years. "Yes," she whispered, 47 angel flights, no failures until 2017. Her throat closed. Her hands trembled. She saw it again, the engine fire, the explosion, the sudden silence in the co-pilot's seat. James Mitchell's lifeless eyes, her own shaking hands gripping the controls, the sound of the families waiting at Dover, unaware she was flying alone. "I brought 5 home," she said, voice breaking. "But James never came back." The hangar was silent. Even the air seemed to pause. "And that," she whispered, tears burning her eyes, "is why I stopped being a pilot. Because every time I sat in the cockpit, all I could see was his empty seat." Her words fell into the room like stones into water, rippling through hardened soldiers and officers alike. Henderson stared at her, no longer the stern commander but a man measuring grief against duty. Martinez's eyes softened, filled with something closer to respect than doubt. The chaplain rested a hand on her shoulder. "And yet here you are, waiting, watching, preparing every angel flight as if you were still flying them. Maria, you never left." Maria looked at the floor, her chest heaving. She wanted to vanish, to hide again. But something stronger rose inside her, the memory of James's voice, firm and gentle, echoing in her mind. "Families are waiting, Maria. Get them home. She lifted her eyes, locking onto Henderson's. Sir, if you delay this flight, those families will wait another day. The parents are 75 years old. Mrs. is coming alone. Mr. has already buried one son. Sir, they've waited long enough. Henderson's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, the commander looked uncertain. And in that pause, that fragile moment of doubt, Maria Santos felt the past colliding with the present. The janitor, the pilot, the ghost she carried, the mission before her. Everything had led back to this moment. But whether they would let her take the controls again, that remained unwritten. Why did the chaplain's voice sound like both a blessing and a sentence? Maria stood frozen in the hangar, her sleeve rolled back, the tattoo exposed. The room still hadn't breathed. The ink on her wrist wasn't just a mark, it was a confession, one she had never wanted to make. And now all eyes bore down on her, waiting, weighing, deciding. Colonel Henderson was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually sharp as steel, carried something softer. Santos, you were an Angel flight pilot. Maria swallowed. The lump in her throat hurt, but she forced the words out. From 2012 to 2017, 47 missions, no failures. The number hung in the air like a medal no one had pinned. Henderson's eyes narrowed. And in 2017, her breath caught. She didn't want to say it again, not here, not like this. But James's name was already burned into the tattoo, carved into her skin. There was no hiding. My co-pilot, Captain Mitchell, he died mid-flight. Engine explosion. I brought the caskets home alone. Her voice cracked and she turned her face slightly away, ashamed of the tears threatening to fall. The chaplain spoke in a low murmur, his tone filled with reverence. The single wing, it is not given, it is earned, through sacrifice, through grief, through carrying on when no one else could. Martinez leaned forward, his young face taut with intensity. Sir, we don't have time for bureaucracy. If she's qualified, if she's done this before, then she can fly. Henderson's jaw flexed. He didn't like being cornered. He didn't like emotion pulling rank over protocol. But he wasn't blind. The coffins waited. Families waited. And the woman standing before him was no longer invisible. Base command will have to authorize, Henderson said finally. He pulled out his radio, his voice clipped, professional. This is Colonel Henderson. Emergency clearance request. Candidate, Maria Santos. Former Angel flight pilot, single wing qualifier. 47 missions completed. The radio crackled, silence, then static, then stand by. Maria's heart pounded. She stared at the floor, willing herself to disappear, but at the same time she couldn't stop the tiny ember of hope flickering in her chest. It terrified her. 5 minutes stretched like an eternity. Every tick of the clock echoed. She tried not to think about sitting in the cockpit again, about seeing James's empty chair, about the weight of silence at 30,000 feet. Finally, the radio crackled again. Colonel Henderson, authorization granted. Santos cleared for emergency pilot duty. The words didn't feel real. They struck Maria like a shockwave. For a moment, her knees threatened to give out. She grabbed the edge of a chair to steady herself. Henderson turned, his eyes locked on hers. Santos, you're cleared. Do you accept? Maria's lips parted, but no sound came. The hangar blurred at the edges. For years, she had hidden behind routine, sweeping floors, checking bolts, fueling aircraft. Safe, detached, alive but not living. And now, with a single order, they were pulling her back into the sky she had abandoned. Her voice faltered. She shook her head slightly, almost imperceptibly. Sir, I don't know if I can. The chaplain stepped forward, his hand steady on her shoulder. His voice was firm, almost fatherly. You can. James would want this. Those families need this. And Maria, so do you. Her chest heaved. Her mind screamed no. But somewhere deeper, in the place she had buried all those missions, all those faces, all those prayers whispered over flag-draped coffins, the answer was already there. She nodded once, small, broken, but enough. Captain Martinez stepped closer. His voice was respectful, unwavering. "Ma'am, I'd be honored to be your co-pilot." Maria turned to him. His eyes reminded her of James's when he was young, eager, full of quiet resolve, but still carrying that spark of humanity. The spark that made every angel flight sacred. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice fragile. Martinez nodded firmly. "Absolutely. I know what this flight means, and I trust you." Trust. The word cut straight through her. Trust had died with James. Trust had been buried beneath 7 years of silence. And yet, hearing it now from a man who had no reason to believe in her, something inside her shifted. "Then we do this together," she whispered. 2 hours later, the engines roared to life. Maria sat in the pilot's seat, her palms slick against the yoke, her pulse drumming in her ears. The cockpit felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Switches, gauges, the faint vibration of power surging beneath her. Her hands shook. She tried to steady them. She glanced at the co-pilot's seat, Martinez adjusting checklists, calm, professional, unaware that in her mind another figure still sat there. James, with his half-smile, his confident nod, his voice saying, "We've got this, Maria." Her throat tightened. She forced herself to look forward. Martinez's voice broke the silence. "Pre-flight checklist complete. Engines green." Maria swallowed. "Roger, engine 1 start." The turbines whined, then roared. The aircraft trembled, alive again. Outside the hangar, personnel gathered in silent reverence. They knew what was at stake. They knew this wasn't just another flight. "Tower, this is Angel Flight 774, requesting clearance." "Angel Flight 774, the tower replied. "Cleared for takeoff, Godspeed." Maria gripped the throttle. Her breath came short and fast. She eased forward. The aircraft rumbled, rolling down the runway. Faster, faster. Her chest clenched. She saw James again, his hands steady on the controls, his calm voice counting knots. But when she looked to her right, it was James. It was Martinez, alive, present, trusting her. 150 knots, he said. Maria pulled gently back. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. The aircraft climbed into the gray November sky. The hangar, the base, the years of silence, all of it dropped beneath her. She was flying again. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Fear and memory tangled like barbed wire in her chest. But then the horizon leveled, and the engines steadied, and the aircraft climbed strong and sure. "Gear up," Martinez said. Maria's hands moved automatically. Gear up. The landing gear retracted. The C-17 surged forward, east to west, carrying 3 heroes on their final journey home. 8 hours to Dover. 8 hours with nothing but sky, silence, and the ghost she carried. Martinez glanced at her, his voice quieter now. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, Captain Mitchell, what was he like?" Her throat closed, but she forced the words out. "The best co-pilot I ever had. 3 years together, 31 Angel flights. He treated every mission like it was personal, like every soldier was his own family." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "Like you do." Martinez didn't look away. And what would he say about today? For the first time in 7 years, Maria felt a small smile tug at her lips. Fragile, painful, but real. He'd say, "Get them home, Maria. Families are waiting." Martinez nodded once. "Then let's get them home." The cockpit fell into quiet rhythm. The autopilot hummed. Clouds drifted by. Maria's grip loosened slightly, her breathing steadied. For the first time in years, she felt something that scared her almost as much as flying again. Hope. But with hope came fear. Because she knew, somewhere along this flight, the ghosts she had avoided for so long would find her again. And when they did, she would have to decide if she could face them, or if the sky would break her all over again. Why did the chaplain's voice sound like both a blessing and a sentence? Maria stood frozen in the hangar, her sleeve rolled back, the tattoo exposed. The room still hadn't breathed. The ink on her wrist wasn't just a mark, it was a confession, one she had never wanted to make. And now all eyes bore down on her, waiting, weighing, deciding. Colonel Henderson was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually sharp as steel, carried something softer. "Santos, you were an Angel flight pilot." Maria swallowed. The lump in her throat hurt, but she forced the words out. From 2012 to 2017, 47 missions, no failures. The number hung in the air like a medal no one had pinned. Henderson's eyes narrowed. And in 2017, her breath caught. She didn't want to say it again, not here, not like this. But James's name was already burned into the tattoo, carved into her skin. There was no hiding. "My co-pilot, Captain Mitchell, he died mid-flight. Engine explosion. I brought the caskets home alone." Her voice cracked and she turned her face slightly away, ashamed of the tears threatening to fall. The chaplain spoke in a low murmur, his tone filled with reverence. "The single wing, it is not given, it is earned, through sacrifice, through grief, through carrying on when no one else could." Martinez leaned forward, his young face taut with intensity. "Sir, we don't have time for bureaucracy. If she's qualified, if she's done this before, then she can fly." Henderson's jaw flexed. He didn't like being cornered. He didn't like emotion pulling rank over protocol. But he wasn't blind. The coffins waited. Families waited. And the woman standing before him was no longer invisible. "Base command will have to authorize," Henderson said finally. He pulled out his radio, his voice clipped, professional. "This is Colonel Henderson. Emergency clearance request. Candidate, Maria Santos. Former Angel flight pilot, single wing qualifier. 47 missions completed." The radio crackled, silence, then static, then stand by. Maria's heart pounded. She stared at the floor, willing herself to disappear, but at the same time she couldn't stop the tiny ember of hope flickering in her chest. It terrified her. 5 minutes stretched like an eternity. Every tick of the clock echoed. She tried not to think about sitting in the cockpit again, about seeing James's empty chair, about the weight of silence at 30,000 feet. Finally, the radio crackled again. "Colonel Henderson, authorization granted. Santos cleared for emergency pilot duty." The words didn't feel real. They struck Maria like a shockwave. For a moment, her knees threatened to give out. She grabbed the edge of a chair to steady herself. Henderson turned, his eyes locked on hers. "Santos, you're cleared. Do you accept?" Maria's lips parted, but no sound came. The hangar blurred at the edges. For years, she had hidden behind routine, sweeping floors, checking bolts, fueling aircraft. Safe, detached, alive but not living. And now, with a single order, they were pulling her back into the sky she had abandoned. Her voice faltered. She shook her head slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Sir, I don't know if I can." The chaplain stepped forward, his hand steady on her shoulder. His voice was firm, almost fatherly. "You can. James would want this. Those families need this. And Maria, so do you." Her chest heaved. Her mind screamed no. But somewhere deeper, in the place she had buried all those missions, all those faces, all those prayers whispered over flag-draped coffins, the answer was already there. She nodded once, small, broken, but enough. Captain Martinez stepped closer. His voice was respectful, unwavering. "Ma'am, I'd be honored to be your co-pilot." Maria turned to him. His eyes reminded her of James's when he was young, eager, full of quiet resolve, but still carrying that spark of humanity. The spark that made every angel flight sacred. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice fragile. Martinez nodded firmly. "Absolutely. I know what this flight means, and I trust you." Trust. The word cut straight through her. Trust had died with James. Trust had been buried beneath 7 years of silence. And yet, hearing it now from a man who had no reason to believe in her, Something inside her shifted. "Then we do this together," she whispered. 2 hours later, the engines roared to life. Maria sat in the pilot's seat, her palms slick against the yoke, her pulse drumming in her ears. The cockpit felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Switches, gauges, the faint vibration of power surging beneath her. Her hands shook. She tried to steady them. She glanced at the co-pilot's seat, Martinez adjusting checklists, calm, professional, unaware that in her mind another figure still sat there. James, with his half-smile, his confident nod, his voice saying, "We've got this, Maria." Her throat tightened. She forced herself to look forward. Martinez's voice broke the silence. "Pre-flight checklist complete. Engines green." Maria swallowed. "Roger, engine 1 start." The turbines whined, then roared. The aircraft trembled, alive again. Outside the hangar, personnel gathered in silent reverence. They knew what was at stake. They knew this wasn't just another flight. "Tower, this is Angel Flight 774, requesting clearance." "Angel Flight 774, the tower replied. "Cleared for takeoff, Godspeed." Maria gripped the throttle. Her breath came short and fast. She eased forward. The aircraft rumbled, rolling down the runway. Faster, faster. Her chest clenched. She saw James again, his hands steady on the controls, his calm voice counting knots. But when she looked to her right, it was James. It was Martinez, alive, present, trusting her. 150 knots, he said. Maria pulled gently back. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. The aircraft climbed into the gray November sky. The hangar, the base, the years of silence, all of it dropped beneath her. She was flying again. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Fear and memory tangled like barbed wire in her chest. But then the horizon leveled, and the engines steadied, and the aircraft climbed strong and sure. "Gear up," Martinez said. Maria's hands moved automatically. Gear up. The landing gear retracted. The C-17 surged forward, east to west, carrying 3 heroes on their final journey home. 8 hours to Dover. 8 hours with nothing but sky, silence, and the ghost she carried. Martinez glanced at her, his voice quieter now. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, Captain Mitchell, what was he like?" Her throat closed, but she forced the words out. "The best co-pilot I ever had. 3 years together, 31 Angel flights. He treated every mission like it was personal, like every soldier was his own family." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "Like you do." Martinez didn't look away. And what would he say about today? For the first time in 7 years, Maria felt a small smile tug at her lips. Fragile, painful, but real. He'd say, "Get them home, Maria. Families are waiting." Martinez nodded once. "Then let's get them home." The cockpit fell into quiet rhythm. The autopilot hummed. Clouds drifted by. Maria's grip loosened slightly, her breathing steadied. For the first time in years, she felt something that scared her almost as much as flying again. Hope. But with hope came fear. Because she knew, somewhere along this flight, the ghosts she had avoided for so long would find her again. And when they did, she would have to decide if she could face them, or if the sky would break her all over again. Why did the runway look longer than any she had ever faced before? The coastline had sharpened into detail. The radio crackled with the calm authority of Dover Tower, but to Maria, each word felt like a tolling bell. Angel Flight 774, welcome home, cleared for final approach. Her fingers tightened on the yoke. Her chest heaved in shallow breaths. Martinez's voice was steady, guiding her through the descent. "Flaps to 30. Flaps to 30, Maria repeated, her hand trembling as she moved the lever. The aircraft responded smoothly, obedient to her touch, yet inside her everything screamed resistance. Memories flooded like a tide. Dover, 7 years ago. The landing lights blinding through her tears. James's empty seat beside her. 5 caskets in the hold but one ghost who never came home. Her stomach clenched. She had sworn she would never see this runway again, and yet here it was, waiting, demanding. "Landing gear down," Martinez called. Maria's hand hesitated, frozen. She stared at the lever, her vision blurred. "Ma'am," Martinez's voice softened, breaking the spiral. "It's just us now, you and me. We've got this." She blinked hard, forcing clarity. With a sharp inhale, she pushed the lever down. "Gear down," she confirmed, her voice fragile but audible. Outside, the honor guard waited. Families waited. Flags rippled faintly in the cold Delaware air. The runway stretched wide, patient, like an outstretched hand. "Approach steady," Martinez said. 200 feet. Maria's breath rattled, her palms slick against the yoke. She imagined James's voice, calm, anchored, cutting through the fear. "Steady, Maria, you know this. Trust the bird, trust yourself." 100 feet, Martinez called. She eased the yoke. The engines roared softer, the plane dipped gently. 50. Her teeth clenched, her whole body trembled. 30. "Flare," Martinez said calmly. Maria pulled back just enough. The C-17 kissed the runway, wheels screeching softly, then gripping firmly. The weight shifted, the aircraft slowed, the engines roared down. The landing was perfect. Maria's chest collapsed with the release of breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Tears blurred her vision. For 7 years, she had carried the terror of that runway, and now she had faced it. "Nice landing, ma'am," Martinez said gently. She couldn't speak, she only nodded. The aircraft slowed to taxi speed. Ahead she saw them, the families. Small clusters of figures by the hangar doors, hands clasped, shoulders trembling. Some leaned on each other. Some stood rigid as if bracing against a storm. Maria's throat closed. This was the hardest part, always had been, always would be. The C-17 rolled to a stop. The engines powered down, leaving behind a silence that roared louder than the turbines. Maria sat frozen, staring forward. "Ready?" Martinez asked quietly. She swallowed hard, her voice barely escaped. "No, but we go anyway." The hangar doors opened. Cold air swept in. An honor guard of soldiers marched forward, solemn, disciplined, carrying the weight of centuries of tradition on their shoulders. Maria rose from the cockpit, her knees weak, her breath unsteady. Each step toward the ramp felt heavier than the last. She walked with Martinez at her side, both silent, both aware that words could not touch what waited beyond. The first family approached, Sergeant David's parents, a Korean-American couple, gray with age, fragile yet unbroken. The mother clutched a tissue in one hand, trembling. The father held his arm around her, his jaw tight with the effort of holding steady. Maria stepped forward, her voice gentle, reverent. "Mr. and Mrs., your son served with honor. This aircraft brought him home." Mrs. Tears spilled freely. She reached out, her hand brushing Maria's arm. Thank you for bringing our David home." Maria bowed her head. "It was my honor, ma'am." The next was Mr., a man in his 60s, shoulders squared with the discipline of his own service, but eyes hollowed by loss. Maria saw it instantly, the kind of loss that had no bottom. "You're the pilot?" he asked, his voice gravel raw. "Yes, sir," Maria replied softly. His jaw trembled. "This is the second time for me. My oldest son, Carlos, died in Iraq. Now, Michael," his voice cracked. Maria's throat burned. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. "Sir, I am so sorry for your losses. Both your sons died as heroes, and today it was my duty to bring Michael home to you." Mr.'s eyes glistened. He nodded, his lips tight, his body shaking with the effort of holding dignity. "Thank you for bringing him home safe, for not letting him wait." Maria bowed her head again, tears streaking her cheeks. Then came Mrs., alone, younger than Maria had expected. She clutched a folded photograph in one hand, her daughter, Corporal Jennifer, smiling in uniform, too young to be gone. Mrs. looked at Maria with searching eyes. "You look young to be a pilot." Maria hesitated. Her sleeve shifted slightly, revealing the ink. The single-wing tattoo. She didn't hide it this time. "Ma'am," Maria whispered, her voice shaking. "This mission, it's personal for me. I lost my co-pilot 7 years ago on an Angel flight. I couldn't fly again until today." Mrs. eyes filled instantly. She reached forward, her hand brushing the tattoo. "You came back for Jennifer." Maria's lips trembled. "For Jennifer, for all of them, for you, for every family." Mrs. embraced her suddenly, tightly, fiercely. Maria froze, then let herself sink into the hug, her tears spilling freely. "Thank you," Mrs. whispered against her shoulder. "Thank you for bringing my baby home." Maria closed her eyes, her arms wrapping around the grieving mother. And in that embrace, she felt something shift inside her, not the erasure of grief, but the transformation of it. The weight was still there. James was still gone, but the silence of his absence no longer hollowed her completely. Something else had taken its place. Purpose. The ceremony stretched for 2 hours. Flags folded, prayers spoken, bugles sounding their mournful notes into the cold air. Maria stood at the edge, her hands clasped behind her, her head bowed. She watched as each family took their flag, as each name was spoken, as each loss became both wound and memory. The chaplain moved to her side quietly. "How do you feel?" he asked. Maria's lips parted. She searched for the word. "Different," she whispered finally. "Good, different." He nodded. "Will you fly again?" Maria looked at her wrist, at the tattoo she had hidden for years, at the names etched into her skin. She took a deep breath. "Maybe," she said softly, "maybe it's time." That evening, alone in her barracks room, she sat at her desk staring at a photograph of James. His grin, his confidence, his unspoken promise that they'd always fly together. She touched the frame gently. "We did it, James," she whispered. "3 more heroes home." The phone rang. She answered. "Santos," Colonel Henderson's voice came through. "How are you?" "Good, sir. Mission complete." He paused. "Would you consider coming back, full-time pilot duty?" Maria's breath caught. She stared at the photo, at James's smile frozen in time. Her chest ached, but beneath it something stronger pulsed. I need time to think, sir." "Of course," Henderson said, then softer. "But Santos, today you honored not just those 3 soldiers. You honored James, you honored the tradition, and you honored yourself." Maria's throat closed, tears welled again. "Thank you, sir." She hung up the phone slowly. Her gaze lingered on James's photo. She whispered again, quieter this time, almost like a prayer. "Maybe it's time." Why did strapping into the seat feel like both betrayal and redemption? 3 weeks after Dover, Maria found herself back inside the cockpit of a C-17. The aircraft vibrated under her palms, humming with power, as if it too recognized her return. She adjusted her harness, hands steady this time, but her chest still carried that familiar weight, the one that whispered she wasn't ready, even as the engines roared in defiance. This time Captain Martinez wasn't beside her. His rotation had ended. In his place sat a new co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Sarah. Maria glanced at her discreetly. Young, determined, the sharp posture of someone who had something to prove. And there, tucked into her flight suit pocket, Maria caught the corner of a photograph, a smiling young soldier in uniform. Sergeant David, Sarah's cousin. "Ready for takeoff, ma'am?" Sarah asked, her voice respectful but edged with something raw. Maria paused, hearing echoes of another voice, James, calm and confident, always ending his checklist with that same phrase. She steadied herself, forcing the ghosts to stay quiet. "Ready," she said. The tower cleared them. The throttle pushed forward. The runway blurred into speed. The C-17 lifted into the gray German sky, carrying another Angel flight home. For Maria, the first hour was the hardest. Every sound, every vibration brought back flashes of 2017. She caught herself glancing toward the co-pilot's seat, half expecting James's familiar profile. Instead, Sarah sat there, jaw clenched, focus sharp, her hand brushing the photograph of her cousin as if drawing strength from it. "You carry him with you," Maria said quietly, surprising herself. Sarah glanced over. "Always, ma'am," she hesitated, then added, "When I heard about this program, when I heard what you did at Dover, it made me want to fly, for him, for all of them." Maria swallowed. Her instinct was to deflect, to stay silent. But Sarah's voice carried that fragile mix of grief and resolve Maria knew too well. She couldn't ignore it. "Flying doesn't erase the pain," Maria said softly, "but sometimes it gives the pain direction." Sarah nodded, eyes bright. "That's enough for me." The words lingered in the cockpit, heavy but hopeful. Maria leaned back, letting the hum of the engine steady her. She wasn't just flying again. She was guiding, protecting, passing forward something James had once given her. Hours passed. The Atlantic stretched beneath them. Sarah handled checklists with crisp precision, but every so often Maria caught her glancing at the photograph, her jaw tightening. It was more than routine. For Sarah, this wasn't just training. It was personal. At one point, Sarah asked the question Maria had both dreaded and expected. "Ma'am, can I ask about Captain Mitchell?" The name cut through Maria like glass. For a long time she didn't answer. She watched the clouds drift past, the horizon stretching infinite. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was everything you'd want in a co-pilot, steady, compassionate. He treated every soldier we carried as if he knew them personally, and when the worst happened, he gave his life trying to save ours." Her throat closed, she gripped the yoke. "I see him every time I fly." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "Maybe that means he never really left." Maria blinked hard. The words were simple, but they pierced something inside her. For years she had seen James's presence as a shadow, a haunting. But what if it was also a kind of guidance? She didn't answer, but for the first time the thought didn't break her. The landing at Dover was smooth. Sarah handled the approach under Maria's supervision, her hands steady despite the tremor of grief in her chest. When the wheels touched down, Maria caught the flicker of pride in the young co-pilot's eyes. "You did well," Maria said quietly. "Thank you, ma'am," Sarah replied, her voice tight but grateful. On the flight line, as families approached, Sarah stayed back, watching Maria step forward. It had become her ritual again, to meet the faces of those waiting, to speak softly, to remind them that their loved one's final journey had been carried with dignity. That night back in her quarters, Maria sat alone at her desk. James's photograph still rested there, the same as it had for 7 years. But beside it now she placed something new, a folded note from Mrs. Jennifer's mother, who had written a single line after the Dover mission. "You came back for her, and for that I'll always be grateful." Maria read the words again and again, and for the first time she realized that coming back wasn't about erasing James's absence. It was about honoring it, about transforming grief into purpose. The next morning Colonel Henderson summoned her. His tone was brisk, but his eyes carried something else. "Santos," he said, "we need to formalize your return. The squadron's short on qualified commanders. You've proven yourself. We'd like you back on full-time pilot duty." Maria hesitated. The weight of the decision pressed heavy. Returning full-time meant opening the wound again and again. It meant risking not just the memory of James, but her own fragile resolve. But then she thought of Sarah, sitting tall in the co-pilot's chair, clutching her cousin's photograph. She thought of Martinez, offering trust without hesitation. She thought of the families, their trembling hands reaching out, their whispered thank yous. She straightened, her voice steady. "Yes, sir, I'll return." Henderson's nod was sharp, but his voice softened. "Good. The program needs you, And more than that, the families need you. Maria left his office in silence, but inside something stirred. For years she had lived as if her story had ended in 2017. Now she realized it had only paused. The days turned into weeks. Flights came and went. Each one carried its own weight, its own faces, its own silent prayers. Maria found herself no longer drowning in memory, but carrying it differently like ballast, steadying her, keeping her true. Sarah grew under her guidance, her hands more confident with each flight, her eyes sharper. Other young pilots watched Maria with a mixture of awe and reverence. Some whispered about the tattoo, the single wing, the story of loss and return. Maria never confirmed, but she didn't hide it anymore. She wore it openly, not as a scar, but as a vow. Every flight still hurt. Every landing still pulled at the threads of grief. But alongside the pain grew something else. Pride, purpose. The sense that she was no longer just surviving the sky, she was shaping it, guarding it, carrying forward a tradition that had nearly died with James. And each time she touched down at Dover, each time she met the family's eyes, she felt the same quiet truth settle in her chest. This wasn't about her anymore. It never had been. It was about them. About carrying the fallen, about carrying the living, about carrying herself back into the light, one flight at a time. Why did the quiet knock on her office door feel heavier than the roar of engines? Maria sat at her desk, the logbook open before her. The ink was still wet from her last entry. Angel Flight 881 mission complete. 3 returned. Families at peace. She closed the book slowly, fingers brushing over the leather cover. For years she had kept distance from these records, afraid of their finality. Now she filled them again with steady handwriting, as if reclaiming the thread of her own story. The knock came again. She called, "Enter." Second Lieutenant Sarah stepped in, her posture crisp, but her eyes still carrying that raw edge of grief. She saluted. "Ma'am, pre-flight checks complete. We're ready." Maria studied her for a moment. Sarah's voice carried strength, but her hands fidgeted slightly at her sides. She reminded Maria of herself, years ago capable but carrying a storm inside. "Sit," Maria said gently. Sarah hesitated, then sat across from her. "You've done well," Maria said, her tone steady. "Every flight you've grown, but I see the weight you carry, your cousin's photograph." Sarah's eyes flickered. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the worn picture of Sergeant David. She set it on the desk between them, her fingers lingering on it. "I can't fly without it," she admitted quietly. Maria leaned forward, her voice softer. "Then don't. Carry him, let him fly with you, but don't let the weight ground you. If you do, the mission ends with grief. It has to continue with purpose." Sarah's throat bobbed. She nodded slowly. Maria reached across the desk, her hand brushing the photograph gently. "He's with you, just like James is with me." She pulled her sleeve back slightly, showing the tattoo no longer hidden, no longer shameful. The black lines of the single wing gleamed against her skin, etched with permanence. Sarah's eyes softened. "Does it get easier?" Maria hesitated. The honest answer pressed heavy on her tongue. "No," she whispered, "but it gets different. The pain doesn't leave. It changes shape. And one day it won't just be pain, it'll be purpose." Sarah nodded again, more firmly this time. She stood, straightened her uniform, and saluted once more. "Thank you, ma'am." After she left, Maria leaned back in her chair. She stared at James's photograph on the wall, his grin frozen in time. "We're teaching them now, James," she whispered. "The next generation. Your legacy, too." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Under Maria's guidance, the Angel flight program began to change. Not outwardly, the rituals remained sacred, unbroken. The flags, the salutes, the bugles still mourned and honored as they always had. But inside the squadron, within the pilots and crews, something new grew. Maria insisted on family briefings for the crews, not just the fallen. She argued that those who flew these sacred missions carried their own burdens, and they needed space to be acknowledged. She established quiet circles after flights where crews could speak or not about what they felt. It wasn't weakness. It was respect. At first some resisted. Tradition was rigid. Military culture stiffened against vulnerability. But Maria stood firm. She didn't shout. She didn't demand. She simply spoke with the calm authority of someone who had bled for the mission, someone who had been broken and returned. One by one, the walls lowered. Pilots began to speak. Co-pilots admitted their fears. Mechanics confessed that they read the files of the fallen the way Maria once had in secret. And through it all, Maria listened. Not commanding, not judging, just present. Her reputation spread quietly like whispers carried on the wind. New recruits came to her with hesitant questions about the tattoo, about the meaning of the single wing. Older pilots looked at her with a respect that bordered on reverence. She never asked for it. She never claimed it. But it grew around her, a silence that she was not just a pilot anymore. She was the keeper of something sacred. One night after a difficult mission, 5 soldiers lost in a training accident, Maria found herself alone in the hangar. The C-17 loomed before her, silent, empty. She walked beneath its massive wing, her footsteps echoing against the concrete. She placed her palm on the cold fuselage. Her throat tightened. "How many more?" she whispered into the quiet. "How many until I break again?" Her voice trembled, but she didn't turn away. She let the question hang in the air, unanswered, until the silence itself became a kind of response. The chaplain found her there, as he often did. His voice was soft, filled with that gentle wisdom he carried like a second skin. "It isn't about how many," he said. "It's about whether you can still carry them with dignity. And you can." Maria turned to him, her eyes wet. "But what if one day I—" The chaplain's smile was faint but certain. "Then someone you've taught will carry it for you. That is leadership, Maria. Not doing it forever yourself. Ensuring it continues when you no longer can." The words sank into her chest, heavy but clarifying. She realized then that her duty had shifted. It wasn't just to fly. It was to prepare others to fly when her own strength finally gave way. From that moment, she began to train with new intent. Every checklist, every briefing, every correction to Sarah or Martinez or any co-pilot who came under her wing carried weight beyond the mission. It was about legacy, continuity, the unbroken chain. Months passed. Sarah grew sharper, her confidence blooming. On her first solo Angel flight command, she tucked her cousin's photograph into her pocket, whispered his name before takeoff, and returned home with steady hands. Maria watched from the hangar floor, pride swelling in her chest. The cycle had turned. The tradition lived. Later that night, Maria returned to her office. On her desk lay a letter. The handwriting was careful, almost shaky. She opened it slowly. "Commander Santos, I wanted you to know that your service means more than bringing my boys home. It means their sacrifice is honored, their families are not forgotten, and their country remembers. You are proof that from the deepest loss can come the greatest purpose." Mr. Maria's breath caught. She read the words twice, 3 times. Her chest ached, but not with the same hollow emptiness it once had. This ache was different. It was full, heavy with meaning. She folded the letter gently, placed it beside James's photo, and whispered, "We're making a difference, James. Every flight, every family, every promise kept." As she turned off the lights and left her office, she passed the silhouette of another C-17 being in the night. Inside, more caskets waited. More families would arrive. More tears would fall. And Maria knew tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, she would be ready. Not because the grief was gone, but because it had become the very fuel that carried her forward. She no longer feared the ghosts. She carried them, and in carrying them she carried everyone else. Why were young pilots whispering her name in hangars she had never entered? Maria didn't know when it began. Maybe after her return to full-time duty. Maybe after Sarah's first solo mission. Or maybe after word spread about the tattoo on her wrist, that small black wing, etched with a name, carried not as decoration but as covenant. At first it was just glances. New recruits would stand a little when she passed. Veterans would pause their conversations when she entered a room. She had spent years invisible in coveralls, a ghost among mechanics. Now, even in uniform, she still felt the urge to disappear. But the silence that followed her wasn't dismissal anymore. It was reverence. She overheard it one evening, walking past a ready room. A group of cadets huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. "Have you seen it?" one whispered. "The single wing tattoo," another asked. "Yeah, do you know what it means?" Maria froze outside the door. She shouldn't listen. But the words rooted her in place. "They say she flew an angel flight alone, brought everyone home after her co-pilot died mid-mission." "No way." "It's true," the chaplain confirmed it. "Only a handful of pilots ever earned it. Most never flew again." "And she came back." "Yeah, she came back." The awe in their voices pierced Maria deeper than any wound. She pressed her sleeve down over the tattoo, hiding it again, and walked away before they noticed her. That night in her office she stared at James's photo. His smile seemed almost amused. "They're turning it into legend," she murmured. "But you and I, we know the truth. It wasn't courage, it was survival, barely." But even as she said it, she knew that wasn't the whole truth anymore. Survival had been the beginning. What she had done since, what she was still doing, had become something more. Months rolled on. Missions came and went. Each one bore its own weight, its own names, its own silent prayers. Maria noticed changes she hadn't intended. Younger pilots began sketching small wings on notepads before flights. Mechanics etched tiny feathers on toolboxes. The symbol spread quietly, not as fashion but as tribute. One afternoon, Martinez returned from a stateside assignment. He greeted her with his usual respectful grin, but his eyes carried something deeper. "You've started something, ma'am," he said. Maria frowned. "What do you mean?" Martinez pulled a folded page from his pocket, a training manual from another base. In the margins, scrawled in careful handwriting, was a single line. "The single wing reminds us to carry on." Maria stared at it, her chest tightening. "I didn't start that," she whispered. Martinez shook his head gently. "Maybe not on purpose, but you showed them it's possible, to lose and still fly, to carry the weight and still serve." Maria looked down at her wrist. The tattoo was fading slightly with age, but the lines remained sharp, uncompromising. She rubbed it absent-mindedly, as if to feel its permanence. "Symbols are dangerous," she murmured. "People put things on them that were never meant." Or, Martinez countered softly, "Symbols grow because they need to." His words stayed with her. Soon after, Maria was invited to speak at a pilot training school. At first, she resisted. She was no storyteller, no motivational figure. She was just herself. Broken, stitched together by routine and duty, but Henderson insisted. So she stood in front of a room full of young faces, their uniforms crisp, their eyes bright with ambition and nerves. She didn't use notes. She didn't plan a speech. She simply told the truth. She spoke of the silence in the cockpit after James was gone, the weight of 5 caskets behind her, the terror of landing alone, the years she had spent hiding in coveralls, pretending she was no one. And then the moment at Dover when she stepped forward again, trembling, uncertain, but unwilling to let families wait another day. Her voice cracked more than once. She paused often, letting the weight of the story settle into the room. She didn't dress it with heroism. She didn't polish it into triumph. She told it raw as it had happened. When she finished, the silence was thick. Then slowly the cadets rose to their feet, not clapping, not cheering, just standing quietly in respect. Maria swallowed hard, her throat burning. She gave a small nod, then left the stage, but inside something shifted. She had always seen her story as a scar. They saw it as a torch. The months that followed confirmed it. Pilots began asking her directly about the tattoo, about the meaning, about the burden. She never glorified it. She told them the truth. It meant loss. It meant pain. It meant carrying something you never wanted to carry. But it also meant promises kept, families honored, missions completed. And always she ended with the same words. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The phrase caught on. She heard it whispered before flights, written on chalkboards, even carved quietly into the wooden benches of ready rooms. Maria didn't fight it anymore. She let the symbol grow, not for her, for them, for James, for every co-pilot, every fallen, every family waiting at Dover. One evening, Sarah returned from another flight, this time as full commander. She walked straight into Maria's office, still in her flight suit, exhaustion and pride etched into her face. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "it worked, the ritual, the names, the prayers, it kept me steady." Maria smiled faintly. "You carried them well." Sarah hesitated, then pulled her sleeve back slightly. On her wrist, fresh ink marked her skin, not a single wing but a small feather. Simple, delicate. "It's not the same," Sarah said quickly, almost apologetic. "I know I haven't earned what you have, but I needed something to remind me, to remind them." Maria's throat tightened. She reached across the desk, taking Sarah's wrist gently. "You don't need my permission. You don't need anyone's. If it gives you strength, then it's right." Sarah's eyes softened, her voice trembling. "I want to carry this forward for David, for all of them, for you." Maria blinked back tears. She released Sarah's wrist slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then you already are." That night Maria sat alone, staring at her own tattoo. For years it had been a mark of grief. Then it had become a promise. Now it was something more, a seed, a legacy. She whispered into the quiet, to James, to every fallen she had carried, to every family who had clutched her hands with trembling gratitude. "It's bigger than me now, bigger than us, and maybe that's how it should be." Outside on the flight line, another C-17 rumbled alive, preparing for departure. The cycle continued, always. But this time, Maria didn't feel alone in carrying it. The single wing was no longer hers. It belonged to all of them. Why did the final flight feel less like an ending and more like a handoff? Years had passed since Maria Santos whispered her first trembling words in that hangar, "I can fly it." Since then, dozens of missions had carried her across skis heavy with memory, each landing weaving her grief into something steadier, stronger. Now she sat in her office at Dover, sunlight spilling across her desk. On the wall hung a framed photograph, Captain James Mitchell smiling in his co-pilot's seat, the two of them side by side before one of their earliest Angel flights. Beneath it, a plaque read, "In honor of those who gave all and those who carry them home." Fresh flowers rested on the desk, always fresh, always for James. The knock on her door was light but confident. "Come in," Maria said. "Second Lieutenant, no, Captain now." Sarah stepped inside, uniform crisp, her face carrying both youth and the sharp lines of responsibility. On her wrist, the feather tattoo she once showed Maria had grown into something new. Two wings, small but defined, a symbol she had claimed for herself. "Ma'am," Sarah said, saluting, "pre-flight checks complete, we're ready." Maria studied her for a long moment. She saw the steadiness in her shoulders, the quiet fire in her eyes. And for the first time, Maria realized she wasn't just training replacements anymore. She was watching a tradition continue, alive and evolving. "Good," Maria said softly, "you'll do well." Sarah hesitated, then asked, "Will you fly with us, one more time?" Maria's chest tightened. She looked at James's photo, at the single wing on her own wrist, faded now but still sharp. She thought of the years she had carried this burden alone, and she thought of the day she had stepped back into the cockpit after 7 years, trembling but determined. Slowly she shook her head. "No, it's yours now." Sarah nodded, understanding. That evening Maria walked alone down the flight line. The C-17 loomed against the setting sun, engines humming in preparation. She paused, her hand brushing the cold fuselage. She whispered a quiet prayer, the same one she had spoken for years. "Watch over them, James. Help them bring our heroes home." The honor guard assembled. Families gathered, clutching photographs, folded letters, each heart heavy with loss. Maria watched from a distance as Sarah and her crew took their places, calm and ready. The engines roared. The aircraft rolled forward, then lifted into the amber sky, climbing steady and sure. Maria's throat tightened, but this time the tears weren't from grief. They were from pride. She stood there long after the plane had vanished into the clouds. Alone, but not lonely. The tradition was safe, the chain unbroken. In the weeks that followed, Maria transitioned into a new role, not pilot, not just commander, but guardian of the Angel flight program itself. She formalized the rituals she once kept in secret, reading the names, learning the families, whispering prayers. She wrote them into training, into doctrine, into the very heart of the squadron. Her story became more than whispers. Aviation historians began to record it, not as a tale of tragedy, but as a moment when the tradition turned, when grief became legacy. The single-wing tattoo spread. Not identical, not but adapted. Some wore feathers, some full wings, some small inscriptions hidden beneath sleeves. Each mark was personal, a reminder that service carried weight and that weight could become purpose. Maria visited Arlington often. She would kneel before James's headstone, white marble among thousands, and lay fresh flowers. She would speak softly, updating him on the program. "Sarah's strong. Martinez is leading flights now too. The cadets know your name. They carry us forward. You're still here, James, in every flight, in every landing, in every promise kept." And sometimes in the quiet she swore she could almost hear his voice again, calm, steady, the voice that once guided her through storms. "Families are waiting, Maria. Get them home." Years later, long after she had passed command to others, Maria remained a presence. Pilots sought her out before their first Angel flight. They would sit in her office, nervous, voices shaking, and she would tell them the same words she had once spoken to Sarah. "The pain won't leave, but it will change. Carry it. Let it guide you. That is how you honor them." She never spoke of heroism. She never spoke of glory, only of dignity, of quiet acts, of promises kept. One winter evening, after attending yet another ceremony at Dover, Maria stood alone at the edge of the runway. Snow fell lightly, catching in her dark hair. A plane lifted into the night sky, its lights glowing against the storm. She whispered softly, not to anyone present, but to the sky itself. "It continues." She pulled her sleeve back, looking at the faded ink on her wrist. The lines had blurred slightly with age, but James's name remained, clear, permanent. For years it had been a wound, then a promise, then a legacy. Now it was something quieter, a covenant. Maria smiled faintly. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts."